Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to make sure that this is still working. Everybody can hear me okay? All right. So I think we're going to get started here. Just to introduce myself, my name is Kevin Raven. I'm the Director of Litigation for Three Rivers Legal Services. And I'm here to talk with everyone about how to avoid predatory lending. So predatory lending is a scary topic, and we're going to make sure we address it as best we can. And if we have a smaller audience, I'm hopefully going to try to tailor things to your questions and your concerns. So if you have a question, just raise a hand, and I'll make sure to talk with you, and we'll see what we can answer about your questions. But first, I want to make sure that I thanked the City of Gainesville, who have been our partners throughout this project and providing information to the community of Gainesville. And I wanted to specifically thank the Crown of Life Ministries for offering their space and time for us this evening. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Kevin Raven. I'm the Director of Litigation for Three Rivers Legal Services. So, just briefly about me, I have been working primarily in Gainesville and in the other 17 counties of North Central Florida for the last decade. Most of my work has involved housing and consumer law, which means that predatory lending practices are a thing I've done a lot to work against and combat over the last 10 years. So I've had a lot of chances to see the different types of schemes that predatory lenders try to use to take people's homes away from them. And importantly, take value, equity, and generational wealth away from families who have struggled very difficult and hard times to build it up. And so we're going to talk today and tonight about a lot of different things that I've learned, different strategies for what to look out for, things to be aware of as you go into any homeownership experience, whether it's at the beginning or well into your years as a homeowner. You got to be careful and look for a few types of practices that are kind of telltale signs, things that are unmistakably connected to predatory lending practices. So I'm hopeful that everyone will take away some practical tips, because the sad truth of a lot of predatory lending, the law is often the predatory lender's friend. That's what they're using to ensure that their scheme is successful, are certain pieces of the law, general ones that everyone knows that they can use to help their scheme succeed. There are some laws that can help undo a lot of it, but the most important thing to remember throughout this is prevention is your best friend. Preventing a predatory lender from getting access to you or your money is the most important thing you can do. So, a colorful illustration, I like to think of predatory lenders as sharks, because sharks are incredibly powerful creatures, and when they grab a hold of you with those teeth, you're not getting out of there without injury. Sure, you might live, but they are going to do their darndest to complete the job that nature gave them with that mouth, those teeth, and that powerful skill they have. So one of the biggest things you can do with a shark is, like when you're at the beach, be careful. When they put out that warning that sharks are in the area, everyone gets out of the water. Yeah, you might survive an interaction with the shark, but you don't want to be in the same pool as them. You don't even want to be close if you can avoid it. So that's a useful metaphor, a way of thinking about how predatory lenders act, behave, and what they're really looking to do to you. So, a few things to remember is that as a homeowner, you are a really ripe target for them. You have a thing worth money, and that's what they want. They don't necessarily want the home that you've built with your family, the generations who are going to live in it or who have lived in it. They want the simple dollar value that home represents. So keep in mind that that's really what they're targeting. And so what they're going to do in many cases to get access to it is they're going to come directly to you. They want to come directly to you at your home because they want to try to suss you out. They want to understand you. Because like any good predator, they want to know who their prey is. They want to try to figure out what makes you tick. What are the things you're worried about? What are the things that we can do to put pressure on you to give us the thing we want? So keep in mind, they're going to look for signs of distress, certain signs of distress that sadly in Florida are public records. For example, have you fallen behind in your mortgage? Has a lender now instituted a foreclosure action against your home? That's something they can figure out simply by consulting public records. Notices of publication go out in certain types of newspapers and other articles where they can find out that a foreclosure case exists. They can simply look in the Alachua County court records and find out that you or your home are under distress. And they're going to use this information to target and decide who they want to visit. It's an easy way for them to start the process of sussing out who is their predator. As I mentioned earlier, predatory lending, and most of the different types of predatory lending we're going to talk about tonight are illegal. But for them to be illegal, they have to first use a piece of the law to effectuate the scheme. Think of it this way. Certain general principles of contract and property law that we have in Florida and all throughout the United States are the foundations that they use to make their schemes legal. And only because these schemes are so prevalent and because people speak out about what happens to them, have lawmakers finally started to enact changes that address the schemes. We'll talk about this thing called equity skimming in a little bit. Equity skimming is a classic example. It was going on in Florida for the better part of 40 years before the legislature finally took action and passed a law specifically to make it illegal, to make it a crime, and to give people a way to try to get back the thing that was taken from them. But again, it took a long time. And it's worth remembering that pieces of these general laws that we have are the things they're using to help craft their schemes, to find ways to take the thing that you want to preserve. So the other thing to remember is that the laws that we've passed to address predatory lending are often very hard to understand. These are complex financial laws and rules and regulations, and it can be really difficult for any layperson, heck, even lawyers, to understand the depths of some of these laws. And oftentimes, because predatory lenders have very powerful friends who can make sure the laws are crafted to have giant loopholes, they often have those loopholes or flaws that make it difficult to bring claims in court. So one thing to just keep in mind, like I will reiterate a million times tonight, prevention is your best friend. Learn the hallmark tales of a predatory lender before you ever actually get harmed by them. Because once you get harmed, it's a lot harder to fix it. I don't want you to give up hope that you can't fix it. You can in many cases, but it's difficult, it's time consuming, and it can take years to fix. So let's talk about who these predators are. What do they look like? The thing is, and the sad part of most predatory lending schemes is you're never going to meet the person behind it all face to face. Predatory lending schemes start with a head honcho, somebody who made a decision way up the line to basically find a way to steal money from people. And what they're going to do to keep themselves insulated and protected from the law and from accountability is they're going to try to have middlemen and ground level grunts who go out to do the door-to-door solicitations and the other ways that people are going to be brought into their scheme. They don't want you to know who they are. They want to hide behind a veil of mystery so that you have a hard time identifying them. Because if you could identify them as they're trying to scheme and scam you out of money, then you could identify and let law enforcement know who they are. They'll get caught. So keep in mind, most of these predatory lenders are going to use agents, these grunts. The most common way they're going to try to reach you as a homeowner is door-to-door solicitation. And I know it's hard, especially if you grew up in a really, really connected community, to see people who show up at your door and know that some of them are literally showing up to try to steal from you. It's a really hard thing to reckon with. And it really cuts against some of the cultural norms that communities build up about being connected and being open, being connected to your neighbors. And so one of the things I want to make clear about this is a tactic predatory lenders will use. They will use a community's connected nature against you. They will hire people who you know to try to do these things with the promise of money. Usually the people they're trying to hire to do this for them are pretty desperate people themselves. You know, maybe they were recently incarcerated and they just got out and they're having a really hard time finding a job. Or maybe, you know, they had a drug addiction problem, they're finally kicked the habit, but they're finding a hard time getting people to trust them anymore. These are the people they're going to try to recruit to do the door-to-door solicitation because they want people. They want people you can connect with, people you might believe, who you will invite in your door. And so it's important to keep in mind that that's the image that they're trying to crack, somebody you will let inside. Because once they're inside, that's when it gets hard. Door-to-door solicitation focuses on intense sales practices. So for example, if you've ever dealt with a company that advertises, hey, we're going to come for free to possibly look at doing some renovations to your house, and we'll give you free estimates, free measurements. As soon as they're in the door, you might notice their tenor changes. We've got this great deal for you, but it's a limited time only. You got to take advantage of it now. And the second you try to pull back, let me talk to my boss. Let me see if we can get you a better deal. The goal is that once they're inside your home, it's really hard to kick them out. And it's because we don't want to be rude. We're people. We don't want to be bad people. We don't want to be rude. We definitely don't want people to think we're jerks. So yeah, it's hard to kick somebody out of the home and they take advantage of this. Because again, the more pressure you feel, the more likely you are to give in to what they want. So again, one of the first things I want you to keep in mind, a telltale predatory lending thing, is if somebody is coming to your door to try to help you with something, anything, and then when they come in your home, you kind of feel like you're captive. They won't leave, and they're telling you things to pressure you. That's a really big warning sign. That's a red flag, and you need to take it seriously that discomfort means you need to do whatever you can to protect yourself, protect your family, protect your home. Because the reason you feel that discomfort is intuitively, you know something's wrong. Listen to your gut. You know, because you can tell when the pressure is being applied. One of the biggest places I have historically seen this is with roofing companies. Just because I think it might be a good illustration, by raise of hands, who here has had a placard on their front door from a company saying, we noticed storm damage on your home? I see at least one hand. I will raise my hand. I've gotten 3 of these in the last 3 months. My roof is old. It doesn't look great. So the reason they do this, and for anyone who's ever had to get homeowners insurance in the last few years, there's a scam they want to perpetrate. They're going to look at any roof they see while they drive around the city. And they're going to look and say, yeah, that looks a little old, that looks a little deteriorated. Heck, if that has a tarp on it, that's perfect. And they're going to come up and say, look, well, we can help you. We can get you a free roof. You're not going to have to pay us anything. That sounds great, right? The reason they say it's free is because, as you might imagine, it's not free. They're going to try to find a way to get that money to perform the service. Now, the first place they're going to want to stop is your homeowner's insurance. They're going to tell you something about how your homeowner's insurance will cover this because it's clearly storm damage. And even if you and they both know that's not true, they're going to try to convince you that if we lie and tell them that it's storm damage, they'll cover you with a brand new roof that you won't have to pay for. Well, the truth is that's roofing fraud, and it's gotten to be such a problem that insurance companies are now refusing to insure any roof in many cases that's older than 10 years. It's gotten bad. And these people have profited from it handsomely because, as you might imagine, early on, people weren't catching on. We have a lot of hurricanes in the state of Florida. We have so many long, drawn-out storms and rain that damage roofs. So at the beginning, insurers weren't really getting a sense that this was a big problem, but crafty predatory lenders caught on. They started exploiting it more and more. And where it hurts the homeowner is insurance companies started denying you insurance because you had made these claims. And when the homeowner's insurance didn't pay for the roofing that these people told you was going to be free, they would file lawsuits against you, trying to get the money they now said they were owed. And you'd say, I never agreed to pay this. I never agreed to pay anything. And they would show up with a document you maybe had never even seen, allegedly with your signature on it saying that you agreed to pay them. Maybe you had actually signed this, maybe you had never touched it. But the whole idea of the scheme was to get this into court where you'd feel compelled to resolve it. Because the risk would be too high. You run the risk that you're going to have to pay out all this money. They might get a lien against your house, you're worried. And even if you'll only settle for a fraction of what they're asking for, they've gotten money. They've gotten something for what they did. So that's just an example that many of our people in our community have seen. It's become a huge problem throughout Florida. Another one that pretty much everyone I know has seen is offers to buy their house for cash. Especially right now in the last year when the housing market has spiked. I get these, and a lot of people I know get these. They usually come in the mail from companies like Yellow Bird, which is based out of Jacksonville. But they also come in a different form. If anyone's seen the We Buy Houses, weird signs on the side of streets, and you're like, who's putting these things up? It's a predatory lending scheme. The idea is that when you reach out to them, maybe because you're desperate for money, and that's really what they're really trying to get, are people who are just desperate. Or people who have heard, yeah, housing prices have increased, maybe I can get good value for my home now. Maybe I can move into somewhere a little nicer, a little better. I've got this roof I need to fix and I can't pay for it, so maybe I can get out of this now and find money to get into a better place. Well, those folks are looking to try to take from the lack of knowledge that you possess, right? They're going to use more advanced tools to assess the value of a property. And then when you reach out to them, they're going to undercut your value by a lot. Say your home is really worth $225,000, right? You bought it for $100,000 20 years ago. It's appreciated in value. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to know what you bought it for. That's a public record. They can look it up. They're going to take the number they know it's really worth, and they're going to offer you somewhere in the middle. Because their goal is to acquire your home, give you cash. So you seem like you're, oh, this is amazing. I get to closing fast. I get a bunch of money. But in reality, you're losing out on a ton of money you might have otherwise been able to get. They're using their superior knowledge and technology in many cases to fleece you. That's not quite predatory lending, but it's a very similar idea. And the same tools from those companies are used for other predatory lending schemes. But it's something to keep in mind that this is one of the ways that they get a hold of you. They use mailers. Not just door-to-door solicitation, but mailers or signs in your neighborhood. Another one to keep in mind is you'll get offers to refinance your home as well. Now you gotta be careful of these because they're often gonna be from companies you don't recognize. Not Bank of America, big national company, not even a credit union like ViStar that's local. It'll be from some LLC that you've never heard of. Hey, we can refinance your mortgage at this amazing rate. That's another way they try to get you on the hook. They'll also resort to robocalls and telemarketing. And this is especially true if you get calls from 352 area codes that you don't recognize. You might want to let it go to voicemail and see what they leave, because a lot of times these people will leave voicemail saying, hey, I drove by your house recently and I'm really interested in making an offer. Just to be truthful, nobody really does that. No real person looking to buy a house is just going door to door looking at houses and saying, I'd like to buy that. Let me figure out whose number this is. So just be aware of some of these schemes and how they try to mislead you from the very beginning. One last one I want to touch on in terms of just who these predators are, because it comes up from the best of intentions too, is what are called green home improvements. You probably have heard of this big effort to try to modernize and renovate people's houses to make things more energy efficient. Whether that's new, air conditioning systems, insulation in the home, even solar panels to help make sure the home can get its own electricity so it doesn't have to get from GRU or any other utility provider. The thing to know though is a lot of the companies that are looking to give them money to fund these solar projects are not so reputable. you have to be really careful because a lot of them are going to mislead you about how you're going to pay them back. Most of the time, these folks will tell you, you don't have to pay anything, without telling you that the bill might come out of your property taxes and assessments later on. And there's some real havoc that those types of loans can wreak on a family if they don't expect what's about to happen. It was a program that came from the best of intentions to try to give more people access to renovating their homes, to making them more comfortable, and really making sure that these energy bills that have always been going up come down. But the sad truth is, even the best of intentions can be misused, and they have been. So it's something to be aware of, and we'll talk more about that. But we're already a little bit in, and so I think we have a door prize to give away, Don. I don't want to bore everyone with just law all the time, so let's get excited.
The first number is, the last three is 862.
Anyone got 862? I think we have a giveaway. Well, there we go. We got a winner already, and we got 2 more to go, so plenty of good fun to come. So I mentioned briefly the predators, and we talked about where they're coming from, what they're looking for, but I also want to talk about why they target primarily communities of color. They look at people who are desperate for help, and they look for people who they think lack knowledge and information about the value of property. They also look for people who they know are in areas of historically low income, areas that you can get information on simply by looking at census data, right? When we run the census, we do this for a lot of good reasons. But one of the things about gathering data and information about folks is everyone can access it. Some people choose to misuse it to find targets. And so they look for people who are primarily desperate for help. Again, I mentioned foreclosures because that is the most right picking. People who are facing the loss of their home to a judicial sale, right? It's a hard thing to go through. You never want to see it happen to you or your family. And so when you're desperate and somebody comes to your door promising a solution, an answer to your prayer, it can be really tempting to believe them. Even if you know, even in your heart, you know what they're promising can't be true, you want to believe. So that's often the biggest target, is somebody who's just in a really tough situation. People who are struggling with bills or expenses, and one of the primary targets for this during a time like now where there's a lot of inflation, are people who are on a fixed income. Seniors, older adults, people who are on Social Security, or communities where there's a lot of folks who have disabilities, who might be on Social Security disability or supplemental security income. They'll also look for people, if there's a lot of veterans who are, maybe over the age of 40, they'll look for people who are on veterans benefits. They're looking for anyone who's not currently working, who might be stressed out by an increased cost for things like groceries or gas. That provides them a lot of opportunities, again, from somebody who's getting a little desperate, somebody who feels that push and pull of the bills that out in their daily life. I mentioned before, communities of color have long been the targets here, in part because of the historical trends related to redlining and racial steering. A lot of those communities of color have formed very tight-knit circles, but as communities grow, what used to be, again, and I'm going to use this very loaded term, undesirable locations became desirable. And now that those properties are worth more money, that the vultures descend. They come because they want to acquire that and steal yet again from people who already suffered in the initial phase of some of the most awful racial discrimination our nation had visited upon communities of color. So again, it's something that I always like to point out because it means that everyone needs to be vigilant and keep their eyes out, and in many ways work to help protect their neighbors from some of these really bad predators. Because in many ways, I think it's pretty easy to say, it's hard for me to come in as an outsider and tell a community, here's what you need to watch out for. It's a lot more credible when it's coming from somebody they know, somebody they believe, somebody they went to school with, somebody they grew up with, somebody they go to church with. That means a lot more to protecting a community than any outsider who comes in to try to tell them, hey, here's how you save things. My hope in many ways in this presentation is that you'll carry this information forward to the rest of your community. Because honestly, you telling people what to look out for is a lot more valuable than me. I'm a lawyer, that's great, and I can help solve problems in court, but I need trust. And building communities and the trust in communities is something that really starts at the most local level. So I just wanted to point that out because, again, their targeting is going to try to get in and divide people. They're going to try to find ways to acquire these properties and start that slow path of gentrification and, again, other forms of steering to get people out of desirable development communities. Working together to prevent them from getting a foot in the door helps a lot. Another place they're going to look is for people who are immigrants. They're going to look for anyone with limited English proficiency too. So Hispanic communities have often been a target of this, especially in and around Orlando. Orlando has been a hotbed of these problems across the number of years because there's a lot of immigrant populations who end up in Orlando. And yeah, if you have limited English proficiency and you don't know how the American legal system works, you're an easy target. So again, it's something to always keep in mind. They're also going to look for people who they deem to lack education. Now, again, I'm not saying that people they're targeting are uneducated. That's what they think. And so they're going to try to find ways to exploit what they perceive as lack of education. And so we'll talk more about how they're going to use very fancy words that even they don't understand to try to misdirect you. So just keep that in mind as well. So some of these are buzzwords that are going to be really handy to keep in mind. And anyone who's dealt with buy here, pay here car lenders will recognize some of this because it's a lot of the same tactics. No credit, no problem. People who are telling you the fact that you don't have credit or you have really bad credit, we can get you a loan. Yeah, they can get you a loan that's going to be awful. That's the thing they're omitting. They're telling you a partial truth. And that's always something to be careful of because, again, a bad loan may be worse than never having one at all. There might be other things you could have done instead, and they're never going to mention those to you. If you ever hear somebody say, I just happen to be in the neighborhood when they're doing a door-to-door solicitation or in one of those mailers I mentioned, yeah, they don't just happen to be in the neighborhood. Don't believe that for a second. They're there because of a specific design, a specific plan that they came up with beforehand to target this community. They're viewing it and they're doing it very tactically. Never assume that these people are acting, on a whim. You also think, again, I mentioned this before with the roofing of no cost to you, right? Misleading you and not talking about the other things they'll do if the thing that they're trying to tell you doesn't work. If we can't get your homeowner's insurance to pay for it, yeah, you're gonna pay it. They're not telling you the quiet part. Also, be careful if you get people who talk about unspecified government programs. There's a lot of government agencies out there. The city of Gainesville has dozens of its own at the local level. The state of Florida has hundreds. Every county has dozens. And the federal government has dozens of its own subdivisions and hundreds of programs. If they're not willing to tell you what the program is, then it's not a program. It's something that they're just trying to use to get you in the door because you might trust that a government program has helped you in the past. If you've been helped by SHIP funds in the past to help do home renovations, you might not remember what SHIP is, but you remember it's a government program. And so they're going to use that trust that you've gotten with government agencies, and they're going to try to abuse it. And like I mentioned before, there's a bunch of others that come up at acquisition, like when you're looking to buy your first home. If you ever hear of things like lease with an option to purchase, rent to own, I mean, with personal property like a TV, that stuff's also dangerous for a laundry list of reasons. But with real property, homes, it's a lot more dangerous because what they're not telling you is that each of these types of purchase situations are traps. If you make a mistake, you're not going to end up in foreclosure like a homeowner who bought with a traditional mortgage would. They're just going to try to evict you as if you're a tenant. And you're gonna be all of a sudden surprised, like, why did I get sued for eviction? This is my home, I own it. And they're gonna come to court and they're gonna argue, no, you signed a lease, here's the tenant. Even though you paid a down payment. In one of my former clients' cases of $10,000. Again, contracts were pretty clear, but they filed an eviction. Now, we were able to help that person, but it's an incredibly scary situation to go through. And ultimately, my client was able to use a traditional FHA mortgage to purchase her first home, and that was successful. And again, it just kind of speaks to something else we'll talk about these alternatives to traditional loans are often, they're designed to victimize. They're not designed as an alternative. They're really just designed to try to take advantage of people. And the final note I had on there was, again, watch out for jargon, right? Lawyers, and I'm guilty of this too, we will use a lot of legalese, right? I will use words like reasonable circumstances, whatever that means, right? But if somebody comes up to you and starts talking to you about like, well, you know, we just need to do your amortization and we'll get all of these things sorted out at closing. Like, those are two very powerful legal words. They have meaning to me. But if you just heard me say amortization and you don't know what that means, you got some questions to ask this person because they're assuming a lot. One of those assumptions is you're not going to question the term they just used. We'll talk about one of the biggest tips I have is when you hear somebody use a word you don't know in some of these interactions, the best thing you can do is say, what does that word mean? Oh, it means, and all of a sudden, it's revealed. They're using a term they don't know. They've been taught, they've been told to use it. You start to get your suspicions up, you start to be more cautious and careful, you are now preventing the harm. So let's talk a little bit about the different schemes that predatory lenders use. The biggest one, and I keep mentioning foreclosure because it's something I saw a lot of when I first started out, and when I worked in Jacksonville, I saw a lot of this. It's called equity stripping. The way that this works is pretty simple. When a person goes into foreclosure, right, they're worried about saving their house. They're not thinking about other things in many cases, right? They got a job, they've got a family to feed, they're worried about keeping that roof over their head. An enterprising predatory lender is going to show up and try to promise them a way out. And the way out is you simply give me your home, and I will lease it back to you. And that way, you don't have to worry about the foreclosure anymore. This will solve it. It's going to go away. It's just going to disappear. And you're not going to have to pay that debt anymore. I'm going to be the one responsible for that, which is a lie. What they're going to ask you to do is give them a deed. Now, just by raising hands, has everyone here heard of a deed? A legal document called a deed, right? So a deed is a very simple thing. It's a very powerful thing, though. It literally transfers your legal ownership interest in property to another person. And it does it usually forever. It's an irrevocable transaction. The whole purpose of a deed is meant to be a record. If you gave this to somebody else, that's the end of the story. So as you might imagine, when they ask you for this, they're not asking you for something simple, they're asking you for something deeply personal. It's a record that you're giving it to them, that they are now the owner. So think about that. Why would they be asking for something like that, but not, say, paying you for the property? Oh, I'm getting you out of the debt. Okay, well, what about the bank? Does the bank know that you're getting out of the debt? Are they signing this document? No. And that should start to ring some alarm bells. There's this other person, this other company that has a huge stake in what's happening. And yeah, I may hate them, but why aren't they part of this? It's by design. It's to make sure that you don't know that you're still going to be on the hook for that debt. Even if you gave this guy the property, that's not going to release you of your responsibility to pay the debt you owe. And importantly, it's not going to get rid of the debt's ability to take the property through this foreclosure process. So again, what usually happens is when they do this, they'll then lease back the property, maybe to you. That's really the saddest one, is where they try to get the homeowner to start paying them rent, saying that they're now the owner. Yeah, that's tragic. But like I mentioned before, I had a client who had a scam like this, and what happened is she was actually the tenant that they rented to. The people who got ripped off were actually another set of people. My client was only the second victim in line. So again, just to review, this means a pair of homeowners, Asian American homeowners, lost their home. They deeded it to this guy as a foreclosure rescue scam, and he promised to pay their mortgage, which he never did. And how did he make his money? Now his owner turns around and does a lease with option to purchase with my clients. He pockets money from one and pockets money from another. Now you see how these predatory lenders are working. So luckily, the original owners sought an attorney, and they were able to bring a case in court to try to revoke this fraudulent act. And luckily, they were going to be able to do that. Not my clients, so unfortunately, I don't know how their story is going to end, but I know their claims are going to succeed at some point. But keep in mind, that happened 2 or 3 years ago. And last I checked, it's still not over for them. And that's sad. That's what I'm talking about. These scams can really live for a long time. Even if you can solve them, there's going to be a long journey to get there. Now, for my clients, luckily, we were able to get them back their money pretty quickly, but only because we flagged this guy and we had him dead to rights. That was great. He gave back the money, but it still took a lot of work. And it's something that without an attorney, they may not have been able to do on their own. So it's just a thing to keep in mind about what this looks like and what it's really focused on is taking away the value of your home and leaving you with nothing but debt. Another type, oh yes, ma'am.
Same thing happens also with a person is delinquent on their property tax. The scammer or the predatory person pay the property tax and have them sign a deed also. Is that possible?
So the question was, could something similar happen with property taxes, where a homeowner falls behind on their property taxes, and then this predatory lender or scammer goes and pays the taxes and then shows up and demands payment? The answer is yes, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too, because property taxes are sadly one of the strongest sources for predatory lenders to use. A lot of people don't fully understand property taxes and also property assessments, which are a separate thing, very similar and related to them. And we'll talk more about how they use those in a few moments, but I do want to put a pin in that because it is an important thing for us to cover. One of the other big ways that predatory lenders are going to seek to take advantage of people is going to happen when you sign a loan. And that is through hidden terms and costs. So if anyone's ever taken out a loan before, buy a home or heck, just to borrow money for a car, you will remember probably seeing 4 big bold boxes at the top of a contract. Anyone remember seeing these before? The very top of the contract, this is required by a federal law called the Truth in Lending Act. They're just 4 big old boxes that set out things like an interest rate, the cost of credit, the total amount you're borrowing, and the total amount you're going to repay over the life of the loan. Now, this law was admirable. It was passed back in the 1970s. And its goal was to help people understand that when you borrow money, there's a cost to it, and you should know what it is from the very moment you sign the document. The problem is it was written by lawyers, and as the best of intentions of lawyers happens, it doesn't really make sense if you don't know what it's talking about. It should be simpler. Sadly, we've never gotten it fixed, but its purpose is to disclose these kinds of bulk fees that predatory lenders are going to seek to insert to inflate the amount of money that you have to pay them back over time. So say, for example, you want to borrow $50,000 to buy a home. That's its cost. And you're having trouble finding that financing with a credit union or a bank. So you come to me. I'm a local hard money lender. You're desperate, you need some help. And I say, yeah, you know what, we'll do, I can make $50,000 work. I can help you buy your home. But what I don't tell you is I'm going to jack up the cost. I'm going to lend you $55,000. Now, the purchase price of your home is still $50,000, but I'm going to put in $5,000 as part of the purchase price. For fees, after all, I have to sign this, I have to create these documents, and there's many of them. They're very heavy. I have to spend 20 minutes on a computer to make it. So I'm going to charge you $1,000 for that, just because. And I'm gonna hide it from you. I'm not gonna really make it clear, right? After all, you came to me for 50,000 and now I'm just gonna say, oh, just sign these and I'm gonna make sure that you buy your house. This is one of the ways that they can try and disguise these fees and costs, and specifically origination fees. When you buy a house, there's this fancy document you're supposed to get called a HUD-1 settlement statement. And its goal is to show you every element of your transaction, everything that goes into buying a house, every dollar and cent that you could possibly be required to pay. So if you're ever looking to buy a home or refinance a home, you should scrutinize that more than any child who came back late at night, with an excuse of where they were. You give them the 1 hour inquisition. You want to do twice that with a settlement statement. You want to make sure you know what every single charge on that is for. And if you see something that says origination fee, $1,000, credit counseling fee, $500, Gerald's bike fee, $250, you got to ask questions about where all of that money is going to. And the more questions you have, the more likely you're dealing with a predatory lender. They're trying to increase the value of the loan, because at the end of the day, they're giving the same amount of money they would have if you didn't pay these fees. You have to pay it back to them over 20, 30 years. And it greatly increases the cost for you. There's one other thing they tend to do with these, and that's balloon payments. So one thing you'll find with some lenders is when you first apply, you might have a hard time finding a loan to buy a home because your income's not high enough. You'll hear this a lot, that they are targeting this magic number, 30% of your disposable income going to your house payment. No more. Anything more and you're gonna be house burdened. You're gonna be paying too much money, and the risk that you fall behind increases. So a lot of folks, especially who are low income, are gonna find a real tough time because of this. So what some lenders will do is say, look, you can afford this house actually. I just gotta rework the numbers. And they'll tell you that you're gonna pay a very low monthly payment, maybe $200 a month, something you can afford. But they're gonna tell you that, oh, there's this thing called a balloon at the end, but don't worry about that. We'll settle that when we get there. A balloon payment is basically a huge chunk of debt that's gonna come due one day, all at once. And when it comes due, you have to pay it or you lose it, everything. That's why it's called a balloon, because it inflates, and then all at once, in an instant. So where I've seen these loans structured is usually people will think they're getting a traditional 30-year mortgage, right? I think everyone's probably heard of a 30-year mortgage. But the document they actually sign is a 10-year mortgage with a balloon. And what it means is you make the same payments you would in a 30-year, that way you don't really notice the difference. I mean, you're paying the same thing. But after 10 years, all of a sudden the lender shows up and demands $58,000 and says, if you don't pay me in 30 days, we're gonna foreclose. That's a balloon payment. And so obviously, most people, the vast majority of people cannot afford to pay these. So what's the option? Well, that lender's all too happy to tell you about the option, which is to refinance your loan with them. How lovely, they're so generous. And now they're gonna pack it full of $10,000 in extra fees this time. And so yeah, you can see how this scam works. You now feel trapped, it's hard to get out of this. How are you gonna come up with $58,000? A foreclosure? Stress? They're trying to pull you back in, and they're gonna use this opportunity. Now, the sad truth is there are balloon payments in more legitimate mortgages too. HUD even uses balloons in some of its loan structures. But the important thing is they're usually very small balloons. And when HUD does this, HUD gives you a lot of ways out of it. A lot of different opportunities to refinance and nothing that comes with an immediate threat. So it's important to always look at the terms. Again, always make sure you know how long am I expected to pay this? And do I have to pay any part of it at the end? Or am I just paying it off over time like I expected? Keep those things in mind. A similar scheme that works alongside this is one called loan flipping, which is basically the same lender comes back to you every year asking you to refinance your loan. And I don't know, maybe they'll say, hey, look, you'll get $1,000 if you refinance with us. You have to ask, why are they so generous? Why do they want to refinance my loan? I'm paying as I'm supposed to. What's the deal? Well, look at the loan carefully that they're offering. Is the interest rate higher? It probably is. Is the term of the loan longer? It might be. Instead of 20 years to go, maybe this one says 30 years to go. They're using an incentive, $1,000 today, to get you on the hook for $10,000 over the course of this new loan. Or, like before, they're just trying to pack in new fees to increase the total balance. Either one could be the case, but always be careful because lenders usually, your institutional lenders, Bank of America, ViStar, they're not going to come back to you. They just want to service your loan. Keep paying them. Maybe some extra fees if you fall behind. They'll be happy with those. But they're not going to come back to you every single month and try to refinance it. So be careful. One other thing to just keep in mind, and I speak to this because it comes up a lot, are what are called servicing transfers. So anyone here get a mortgage loan and then all of a sudden find out that they're going to be dealing with a new company shortly after they bought their home? I see some head nods. It's pretty common. So a lot of times when you look to get a mortgage, the first lender is what we call an originator. They're the one that creates the documents for the loan. They're the ones that lends the money in the first instance, but they don't want to collect it. Ugh, too much work. So what they do is they sell it. As soon as you've signed everything and they've recorded the documents, they sell off the rights to someone else. And that's legal, that's all fine. We allow people to do this. The problem that happens is sometimes it can happen fast and it can happen multiple times in succession. So all of a sudden you get a letter from Celine Finance. We're your servicer. We're going to be collecting your payments from now on. And so you start paying Celine. You follow the instructions in their lovely letter. But a month later, you get one from NationStar saying, we're going to collect your loan now. Okay, fine, that's fast. So you start sending NationStar payments. Now you get a third one. And this one is from some entity called Select Portfolio. And now it's saying you have to pay them. This should set off alarm bells because you're going too fast. This is not normal. Servicing transfers like that are happening because people are missing their payments. Basically, what happened in this hypothetical is Celine didn't get your payment, or they got your payment and failed to notify somebody that they got it. And so they go ahead and transfer it to another servicer because you're now in default. That default servicer charges higher fees, they do different types of collection, so they transfer it off to NationStar, right? And you send in your payment to NationStar, but now neither Celine or NationStar are talking. No one knows who's got your payment where, and so it gets sent off to yet another servicer. And that kind of transfer can get you mixed up. So you've always got to be careful to do two things when you're dealing with a servicer. One, always keep records of your payments. Keep your own record. Don't rely on theirs. Keep your own log of payments you make. If you have an online banking solution that helps with this, that's great. But I'm a little old school. Keep a physical logbook, or if you like Excel spreadsheets like a nerd like me, you keep it in an Excel spreadsheet. You do anything you can to keep your own records of payments. Not just the amount, the date you paid, how you paid, and who you paid. Because in the event there's a mistake, and one of these entities says, oh, we never got that money, you know who to point the finger at. And helpfully, federal law provides you a way to try to hold them accountable for this. There's actually this really cool law called the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, or RESPA, which I just like the way to say it. RESPA just sounds fun. But it's a powerful law that helps all kinds of borrowers hold a servicer accountable when they misapply payments, even when it's happening because of a servicing transfer. It's a little complicated how you use it. And rather than go through the steps, I would just tell you, just keep in mind, if this happens, there are some actions you can take, starting with contacting the servicer. Just keep those things in mind. There's always something you can do. And the more information you get on the front end, the better. Just act fast when you catch on to something. So I think we'll take another break to do another raffle draw. So I'll turn it back over to Donna.
last three numbers are 871.
871, who's got the lucky ticket? Oh, there we go, winner, winner.
Oh, that says 872. That was the last.
872. So 871. Any takers? Somebody's got that.
I think 872 was the previous number that we put. No one else says 871, right? I think that was yours. You guys came in together. All right, we're good.
All right, so good, close enough. So there's a few last practices I want to touch on because they are ones that are pretty common in Gainesville and in Alachua County. I mentioned these home improvement loans, again, these green improvement loans. Again, I can't stress enough how much I really like the idea of better weatherization, more energy efficiency in homes, and specifically homes that can generate their own power so that people don't have to be reliant entirely on the grid. Saves you money. Less electricity bills you have to pay, it's a great thing. The problem is a lot of the lenders don't talk to you about how you pay for this. So the easiest way to think about this program is called PACE. What happens with PACE is the lender originates a loan to help you pay for solar panels, new attic fan, needed weatherization or improvements to your home, heck, new windows. Anything that makes your home more green, energy efficient. But a lot of times the lenders don't tell you how you're going to pay, which is through property assessments. So everyone knows property taxes, right? If you own a home, you have to pay the government a tax for the home you own. Sad truth of life, there's taxes on everything. There's also these things called assessments. They're basically a way that a municipal government, the county, the city, pays for other services like fire services, right? And so they're raised and voters have a chance to reject them or approve them, and people go to city council meetings and get in all kinds of fights about them. But one of the types of assessments is a property assessment for these clean energy loans. So instead of paying out of pocket and having to pay on a monthly basis to this lender, the city pays for this, and you repay the city through property assessments. The thing is, you may not realize it's happening, and critically, if you have a mortgage, you may not realize it's going to increase your mortgage payment dramatically. Most mortgages require that you pay your taxes through your mortgage company. It's called escrow, but that also covers assessments. So let's say your monthly payment is $1,000. Right? You're paying for your principal that you owe, the interest on that, your taxes, and for your homeowner's insurance. That's the all-in payment that your mortgage company asks for. Well, if you do one of these PACE loans, the next year when those assessments kick in, it could go up to $1,300. And if you are budgeting monthly and you are already on that cusp of 30%, all of a sudden now you see your budget go out of whack. And now you can't afford to pay your mortgage. And you see how the lender got their money. They don't care. They did the thing. They got these lovely solar panels on your roof. But now you're on the hook and you're having to deal with your mortgage company. You didn't expect that. You didn't think that's how this was going to work. It's not that the program's inherently bad. For some people, this is a really good option to help them pay for these needed improvements. But it's a surprise to a lot of people. And so before you ever say yes to one of these, you need to make sure you fully understand how it will financially affect you. And the lenders, again, are really bad about telling people this. They don't care. At the end of the day, they get paid before any of this comes up, right? They're not relying on you to pay them. The city will pay them. The county will pay them. So just be careful when you're dealing with this, or if you see people start advertising, the big one that we've seen is Renew Energy. If you see companies like this, or Renew Solar, or anyone who has that, just make sure you understand what they're offering and how they're telling you you're going to pay for it. The other thing with these companies I've seen that's really worrisome is they will use fancy technology, like, oh, look at this tablet. If you can fill in with your information, we can get you started on an application. What they don't tell you is the signature you're using there, they're going to fix that to every contract that you've never seen. We referred a case to another legal aid organization in the recent past with a case just like this. And luckily, they were able to help that person get out of this PACE loan. But it took a lot of work, and again, many years. So it's something to keep in mind that just be careful if anyone's asking you to do anything with your signature, whether on paper or on a fancy tablet or on a phone. Just be careful. Know what you're signing. See it before you ever touch it. We talked about signing over your home's deed, so I'm not going to go over that again, and the alternative home loan agreements. But again, to get to that property tax question, tied into the assessments are property taxes, right? When you buy your home, you have this thing that happens called an appraisal. It sets the value of your home, and the property appraiser's office does this the first time you buy a house. They basically get this chance to take a look at it and say, how much do we think it's worth for tax purposes? They set the value, they set the taxes based on that. And then from there, they apply certain benefits and exemptions for you. For example, homestead. Homestead tax exemption helps you reduce the value of your home so you pay less in taxes. So the big problem we see come up is when people are on fixed incomes, it can get harder and harder to afford those property taxes in their elderly years. Especially somebody who's over the age of 70, who maybe has been in a home for many generations, is now starting to see those property taxes for the first time start to bug them. And maybe they're having trouble keeping up with them. Well, if they go unpaid for a year, the tax collector's office and the property appraiser issue this thing called a certificate. And like again, with foreclosures, it's this nasty public record that tells creditors that you're available for predatory practices, that you're now a target for them. So they may show up and offer, just like she indicated, to pay your property taxes for you. And oh, you don't have to do anything in exchange, we'll just make sure we take that away from you. And then they may record a lien against your house and say, well, we improved the house. We paid the property taxes, so now we have an equitable interest. They might try to sue you in small claims court for the money that they paid. Or they might just buy the certificate. And by buying the certificate, in another 2 years, they'll have the right to demand a tax sale. By raise of hands, does anyone here know what a tax sale is? Lawyers and the folks from the city know, and I didn't see any other hands, and that's the thing that always worries me. When you don't pay property taxes, there is a way that the city tries to recapture that money, the county tries to recapture that money. And it's through issuing these certificates. So people buy them in order to make sure the taxable revenue for the city or the county is recovered, right? Again, you gotta raise the money to pay for fire, for teachers, for everything else. The downside of this is that when those certificates exist too long, like I mentioned, about 2 years, the certificate holder can ask for a sale to satisfy the debt that's owed to them. Let's say it's $1,000. And what they can do is they can ask for this sale, and the property appraiser's office has no choice but to commence the process. They send you a letter telling you you have to pay off all the delinquent taxes on your property or it's going to be sold. Your whole home. No foreclosure, no judge, no judicial action whatsoever. It's simply a non-judicial process that is done by the property appraiser and the county tax collector. And if you're unable to satisfy that tax debt by the time the date comes for the sale, your home is sold. Maybe for as little as $1,000 that you owed. Your home maybe sells for $50,000. You've lost your home, and now your money's tied up in this thing called a surplus fund that you have to make claims on, and by the way, your creditors, like your mortgage company, can make claims on. So it's this really dangerous surprise that comes to homeowners, especially for people who don't really know much about property taxes. And so just keep in mind that that's something that I think is really worth knowing, how fast that process moves, that it doesn't involve courts, because it can be really harsh and a really rude awakening for folks who all of a sudden wake up one day to find out they're no longer their home's owner. So just a thing to keep in mind. So I've organized a few things into what I call you should and please don't. Please don't, because I am pleading with you. Please don't do these things. Please do it as a favor to me, don't do these. So one thing you should do is you should read every contract. This goes beyond home contracts. Any contract anyone presents to you, or worse yet, when you're online and you click the box and they say, please read this long giant thing,
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but you really should read it. In part because if you don't read it carefully, there's things you might overlook. Now, with the internet click boxes, I mean, if it's nothing that important, yeah, maybe skim it. But when you're dealing with your home, you don't want to skim it. You don't want to take anything for granted. And specifically, if you read something and you go, what on earth did I just read? I don't understand any of this. You need to get somebody to advise you on what it does say, somebody you trust. And especially if the person who's presenting it to you is somebody you do trust, you should have even more questions. So never assume anything. As a consumer, it's your job, and in fact, it's your lifeblood to question everything. Again, people talk about consumer satisfaction, customer service. Part of being a consumer and a customer is demanding answers to questions. And when people don't give you a straight answer, or when they're evasive, or they lie to you, you should take that information and use it to walk away from them. Shop around for loans. I can't stress this enough, especially if you're looking to refinance your home, right? You want to find multiple different options that people will offer you. Maybe one place is 30-year mortgage, 5% interest. Another might be 20 years, 3% interest. You have to weigh those options. Which of these is going to work out better for you? And if you shop around, you're going to get more options to choose from. Know whether you can cancel a deal. This is probably the most important piece of consumer advice I can give to people. You can almost never cancel a transaction involving a loan after it's been signed. Now, in certain contexts, like buying a home, you have a very short 3-day period in which to cancel. Outside of that, there's not really much of a cooling off period. Car loans are usually the worst of this. I think a lot of people often think if I turn in the car, the debt goes away. Sadly, that's not true. And again, people think that I can cancel a contract after I sign it. And the answer is no. In fact, by thinking you're canceling it, you're actually breaching it. You're giving them the right to sue you. So you've got to be knowledgeable and remember that canceling a contract is rarely a thing. Rather, always be careful before you enter it. Research who you're dealing with, the lender and the loan. So again, this gets back to that balloon mortgage. If somebody tells you, oh, we're going to do this as a balloon, and they don't explain it to you, well, you need to know what that is. You need to do some research from credible and trustworthy sources to make sure you know what you're dealing with. And you should use government-backed programs like HUD-certified housing counseling agencies. We'll talk about them again in a little bit. Or credit counseling agencies, people who don't charge you anything for the services they're giving. They're there, they're given money, much like our organization is, to help people at no cost to the people themselves. Use them, that's what they're there for. They're there to provide you knowledge, education, advice, and guidance. And if you qualify for their services, take advantage. That's the whole point, that's why they're there. Please don't, as I mentioned, sign a contract without reading it. Make sure you understand everything. Again, even if it sounds silly and you feel like you're harping on the same thing for the 10th minute of a discussion with somebody, keep going. Until you understand it, you shouldn't sign it. Don't let other people, and I must stress, especially not your family, pressure you into signing something like this. Again, the sad truth for some family members is they're more desperate than even you are, and they may not have told you about how desperate they are. Could be financial troubles of their own. People don't like to talk about that. And they might be pressuring you to do this thing to solve your problem. You've got to ask yourself, why are they so intent on this? Are they going to get something out of it? Do they profit from it? They might. Sometimes they might be the person who gets a little kickback. And you've got to be careful. I'm not saying don't trust your family, but everyone knows their family. Everyone knows sometimes your family isn't always honest with you. So ask questions. Make sure you know. And always just think in the back of your head, why are they pressing so hard? The more you think, the more careful you'll be. Don't sign any documents with blank spaces. That's kind of an obvious one, but if somebody leaves a giant blank, they can just write in whatever they want to after you've signed it, and who are you to tell somebody else that that didn't happen? Make sense? Just if there's a giant blank, don't leave it. Don't sign anything that has blank pages or any blank signature or any blank spots. That's usually a red flag that somebody's trying to insert something after you've signed it. This is another one. Don't misrepresent your own financial status to get a loan. This is mostly a warning and danger for people. When you're desperate, sometimes you're going to inflate your income to make sure you qualify for a loan. At the end of the day, you're the person who gets burned if you don't pay. And so if you do this, I'm not worried about the fact that you told somebody something that wasn't true, whatever. I'm worried about the fact on the back end, you know you couldn't afford it. And it's going to come back to haunt you, not them, not anybody else. And that's the thing to be careful of. Because at the end of the day, you want to protect yourself, even against sometimes yourself. And don't convince yourself of a good deal. If something seems like it's too good to be true, yeah, it probably is. Don't convince yourself, oh, it's so tempting. It sounds so great. Yeah, but there are other things out there. There's other options. So just briefly, there's some telltale signs of who's reputable and who's not. And I'll put a big asterisk next to the first one, which is major financial institutions. The asterisk is they haven't always been and they don't always be. Again, some of our worst parts of the financial crisis of 2008 and 9 were because the major financial institutions were recklessly giving out loans to anyone and hoping that the whole thing wouldn't collapse on them. It did. It nearly broke our entire economy, and it set people back for generations. So the thing I say to trust them about, though, is they're generally not going to mislead you about the thing you're signing. When they present a loan to you, they're highly regulated. They're going to have to deal with the fact that they're going to need to give you the right forms. You're going to have to sign them in the right places. And at the end of the day, they do have money. So if something goes wrong and you have to sue them, they will have to pay. So yeah, they're generally going to be more trustworthy. With major financial institutions, though, I usually would say for most people, trust credit unions. Credit unions are smaller. They do more personal service with loans, and you're going to be able to talk to people in their offices face to face. When you deal with an entity like a Wells Fargo, Bank of America, a lot of the people are going to be by phone, and good luck reaching them if something goes wrong. But with a credit union, say like Florida Credit Union, ViStar, whoever it is, you walk in and say, hey, I need to talk to a loan officer. Right there in the same building. And that does help. This is also true of smaller banks. There's some, I recommend any, don't take any of these as an endorsement, I'm just giving examples. Like Regions is a relatively mid-sized bank. They have branches where people actually do work. So that's usually a better sign too. The more remote and removed an entity is, you're going to have a harder time reaching them if you need them. Local government agencies are also a huge place to trust. And I'm not just saying this because the city of Gainesville is our partner, but I want to highlight some of the programs they have because the city of Gainesville is not unique in this. Different cities across our entire state and our country also have these types of programs. They get funding from local governments, from state government programs, from federal programs to help people with problems when they start. Things like down payment assistance program. The city has a small fund that it can assist certain people with down payments. First-time homebuyer programs at the federal level, there's certain things you can also do to get certain kinds of down payment assistance, or certain things like a FHA loan, you don't have to put as much down when you buy a home versus, say, some other types of mortgages. So it's just useful to know that these programs are there to help people. This also includes things like mortgage foreclosure intervention. Again, some of these municipalities, and I know because I've worked with the city to help our client use the mortgage foreclosure intervention program to help reinstate their mortgage to prevent them from ever getting into foreclosure. And that's wonderful. It helped them when they were in a tight spot. They lost a job for a month, got reemployed, just needed something to cover that gap. The city was there to help. And again, we were able to work together to get that client where they needed to be. And even if they can't help you, because again, these programs do have limited funding, they can point you to the right people. Because again, they're not there. They don't stand to profit from you. Their job is to direct you and help you because you're part of their community. So again, on your level of people you can trust, they're up on that good step. And again, there are these HUD certified housing counseling agencies. Now in Gainesville, we have one of them called the Neighborhood Housing and Development Corporation. They're over on 8th Street. They are provided funding to help people with all kinds of good stuff, whether it's credit counseling and financial planning, which everyone could use. I could use a reminder every now and then on this stuff. But also they're there to help you with things like loan modifications. If you fall behind and you might have this opportunity to modify your loan, going to a lender who is going to maybe try to inflate the cost to you, no. Go to somebody like this, whose job it is to help you work with your existing lender to find a solution to modify your mortgage. And there's a lot of good options available, especially right now because of some COVID era protections. So it's just something to keep in mind that there are good people to trust. Who's not reputable are the people who want to stab you in the back. So avoid your door-to-door solicitors. I can't stress this enough. This is where, again, if they're showing up at your door, they do not have your best interest in mind. That's not why they're there. Mailed and emailed advertisements, people who refuse to answer questions. If people get weird, if you're like, I want to review this contract with an attorney, and they're like all of a sudden getting shaky, yeah, that's weird. Take it as a warning sign. Do not trust that person. Even if you're not really saying that, even if you're just using it to gauge them and say, I want to see how they react to this. They go, yeah, take your time. Well, just let me know, give me a call when you're ready. Okay. And versus, do you really need that? I mean, come on, this is a great deal. You don't want this to pass you by. Come on, let's go. You get a sense. Private individuals running their own credit counseling businesses, be careful. We see this a lot with tax preparation assistance. Some folks offer this idea that I can help you save money on your taxes, because in many cases they're committing tax fraud. They're using fraudulent tools to make it look good for you so they can pocket your money, a portion of what they're trying to get for you, and leave you on the hook responsible for what they do. And one other thing to be careful of is beware of LLCs. I say this because an LLC is a type of business entity that's designed to protect its owner. It's designed, in the name, limited liability, meaning less responsibility. And part of why people structure LLCs, especially in predatory lending, is, again, to mask who the real owner is and who the real perpetrator is, and leave you with nothing you can actually get money from. It's one of the hard things is, if I have to sue an LLC, I have to go through extra steps if I want to hold the owner of the business accountable. And that can take time, it can take energy, and it can be hard. So it's not impossible, but when you see these LLCs and you're not sure who is really behind them, just be cautious. I'm not saying it's always a given, the telltale will always be bad. Just approach it with some skepticism. So before we get into the last little bit here, I think we're going to go ahead and do the last drawing, and then it'll take me maybe 5 minutes, and we're ready to open up for questions.
All right. Last prize goes to 867.
867. Last 3 digits, 867.
Yes? Okay.
Yes? We have a winner again. So, everyone feeling good. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about some of the laws that are out there to help protect people once they've been harmed. The biggest one, and this may seem a little strange, is the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act, which protects people who are members of protected classes on the basis of race, sex, national origin, color, disability, religion. It exists to help protect with real estate related transactions as well. Its goal, simply put, is to end discrimination in housing in all of its forms. So, for example, we talked about the way that these predatory lenders often target communities of color. The Fair Housing Act is a tool to use in that fight. Oftentimes, the disproportionate impact that a lender's practices may have in a community can be the way to combat them. So know that the Fair Housing Act provides an important role in this process, and critically, HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, is empowered to bring cases to help with these practices, and they have done so in several cases involving racial steering from refinance schemes. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act is equally important. Same function. It's trying to level the playing field for people who've been historically discriminated against. And it does so in any situation in which credit is being offered. And so again, it gets to the heart of, are you being treated differently than somebody else? Is this scheme being used exclusively by this lender in one community, but not in a different community that has a different racial composition? Important to keep an eye on and keep in mind. The next set of laws are really focused on consumers, and these are the big ones to use in the fight against a predatory lender. The Truth in Lending Act I already mentioned before. Its job is to make consumers aware of what credit costs. And it also provides for that right of rescission I mentioned, that 3-day cooling off period. Again, the only time it really comes up is in buying a home or closing a home loan. And so you do have this one narrow window of time to get out of it. And if the lender doesn't recognize your rescission within that period, you can do a lot. You can go to court and really solve that problem fast. The Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, again, RESPA, love that law. It's there to help people in their day-to-day issues with mortgage services, right? Again, are they, you're sending payments in and they're not crediting them correctly. They're saying you still owe late fees even though you paid them. Or you're tracking this servicer nightmare. Or you've asked them for information and they're simply not giving it to you. These are all things that RESPA can help address. And ultimately, RESPA provides some really good opportunities for suit if somebody continues to make these problems. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Credit Billing Act, and Fair Credit Reporting Act are kind of all together to help with debt collection issues. And really what they're about is if a mortgage lender starts reporting information to you that's incorrect to these big companies, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and it negatively affects your credit, costing you valuable access to other loans, that's something you can hold them accountable for too. Sometimes, again, even the best of intentions, servicers will make mistakes in reporting what you owe, and it will negatively affect your credit. Like I mentioned before, if you get caught in this servicer transferring nightmare and they miss payments, they're going to report that to credit reporting agencies, and it's going to negatively affect your credit. If it's not true, you've got some options to resolve that with them. Dispute processes and other things you can do to help. Now, Florida also has a pair of laws that are really helpful for consumers too. We have our own Consumer Collection Practices Act and our Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act. That second one I've used to help people who've been victims of that roofing scam. Deceptive and unfair trade practices. Well, what gets the heart of a predatory lender more than deception and unfairness? That's everything of what they do, and so FDUTPA, as it's known, is a really useful tool. It's not unlimited, but it's a very helpful law that helps us combat predatory lending schemes, especially if the Florida Consumer Division of the Attorney General's Office takes note of it and brings their own case. The Attorney General's Office of the state of Florida can actually do a lot to combat a predatory lender. So who can help you with these laws? Now, I mentioned myself in a few of these, and Three Rivers is one of the organizations that can help in a lot of these situations, but we're not the only ones. There are other legal aid organizations throughout our communities. Jacksonville Area Legal Aid focuses on a lot of consumer issues. And as I mentioned, we referred a client to them to assist with one of those PACE loan problems. They specialize a little bit more in some of those issues in consumer law, and certainly you can contact us and we can make sure it gets to them if, for example, you're a victim of one of these. Another that's here locally in Gainesville is Southern Legal Counsel. This is something that if communities of color are finding themselves affected by this disproportionately negative lending practice, they tend to focus on these large impact issues, the kind of thing that are needed to help protect a community. They may be another option to turn to. And beyond that are two other places I would be remiss not to mention. One is the government. The biggest entity that polices these laws and these actors is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. Now, they're lovely. They have a wonderful website. Most government websites are awful. Theirs is about the best you're going to find. It's still not perfect, but it's very good. It contains a lot of really helpful pamphlets and information to help consumers know more about what's happening with auto loans, home loans, and all kinds of other good stuff. And they also try to explain in as simple English as lawyers really can what you can do to help address these problems. So I can't stress enough to turn to them as a resource. And they have a complaint database where you can find out if this person who's come to your door has been a complained party in the past. If 300 other people have said, these people ripped me off, well, you might want to know about that. They keep a public database of this information accessible to anyone at any time. On top of that, if you believe you've been victimized, you can make a complaint to them and they can take action to assist. They are probably the most active federal agency in assisting consumers across the country. The FTC also does some of this. A lot of their authority has been transferred to the CFPB, but the FTC deals with a lot of issues related to identity theft and other issues related to credit. So it's important to know that you might want to turn to them in the event that that's what's happening and that's where the harm is coming from. And HUD, as I've mentioned before, plays a huge role in supplying assistance and funds to help people. I mentioned a program before called SHIP. SHIP is a program to help people with needed home repairs. And specifically, that funding comes from HUD. And it's distributed to local governments and state governments to assist people. So it's just worth remembering that HUD plays an important part in this as well. They also deal with racial discrimination complaints, as well as complaints on the basis of disability and other things that predatory lenders may be exploiting, specific protected classes. The final group is private attorneys. There is a wonderful group of attorneys called the National Association of Consumer Advocates, NACA. These attorneys are specifically focused and prioritize consumer protection. That is their bread and butter. And they do great work across the state of Florida and throughout the country. Now, their members are just regular attorneys who decide that that's what they want to practice in. And they affiliate and work together to work towards these pieces. So, in the event that you're looking for an attorney to assist you, you've been harmed, this search tool that I put in here, and it's also in that pamphlet that was at the front, the little 3-pager that had the tips and tricks, that's a fantastic place to start your search for an attorney. These are the specialists, the people who are really trained to do this work. And so, in conclusion, predatory lending is incredibly harmful. It comes for people who lack knowledge and they try to exploit that knowledge disparity to take advantage of people, usually people who are already in a tough situation. The best thing you can do is keep your eyes out for some of these schemes we've talked about today. Share it with your neighbors so that eyes can remain vigilant for what's happening, so that the earlier you catch it, the better you can solve it. But if you find out that you've been a victim, and all of a sudden things start to get a little crazy, reach out to an attorney as soon as you can. Try to seek legal advice about what's happened so that you can try to work on it sooner than later. Because if you get to a foreclosure or a tax sale, you may be too late. So please, and I must stress this, do what you can to get on top of it soon. It can be really hard to talk about. It can be really embarrassing. But don't let that be the thing that causes you even more harm. Trust in some of the good people who are out here to do good work. HUD certified housing counseling agencies, folks at the city who can help you identify and fix the problem early. So I'll open up to any questions that people have. Yes, ma'am.
You had mentioned on NACA, but someone sent me a TikTok of another type of NACA. It's called Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America.
That would be a different one, yeah. I'm not familiar with that NACA, but yeah, the National Association of Consumer Advocates, think of them like a group of superheroes. They all have their own, places they hang out. Batman's, off in Gotham City, Superman's in Metropolis. But they get together as the Justice League to solve big problems. It's kind of NACA's idea, is we get these attorneys who are spread out all across the state of Florida. I know some in Jacksonville, some in Orlando. But they do work up here too. When they get people who contact them and who say, look, I predatory lenders showed up and made me enter into this balloon payment thing, and I'm about to lose my home, what's going on? They know what to ask you. They are trained specifically to identify what happened and what legal claims you might have, both to stop the bleeding and the harm, and possibly to recover either money or property depending on what the situation is. So again, this gets to, we are a legal services organization and we love to help everybody, but we simply can't help everybody. So I never want us to be looked at as the only place to turn. Think of it broadly, think of all the people out there who could help and try to make sure everyone knows where they are.
People claim that you don't have to put a down payment and you don't have to pay a closing costs. Do you think that they're predatory lending?
Possibly. There's some warning signs there. We talked about this. No down payment is a little unusual. Like I said, the purpose of a down payment is because if you're lending somebody a lot of money, it's going to take them a long time to pay it back. And whether they can afford to pay it back, one of the surest signs is by getting them to pay some money down now to help mitigate the risk that they don't pay you back in time. So if somebody's saying, oh, I'm going to absorb all that risk, I'm going to lend you that money, I don't even care if you pay me back, it's a little strange. Sure, it sounds good to you as a consumer. Hey, that's less money out of my pocket. But you have to ask, what's the trade? Because they're trying to make you think it's too good. So what's the trade-off I'm making? Honestly, for something like that, the trade-off is probably two things. The interest rate they're going to ask you to pay over time is going to be a lot higher than other people. So yeah, you won't have to give them $10,000 down because you're going to pay them $20,000 in interest over the life of the loan. They stand to profit. They will make it a killing. Now, if they're honest with you about that and say, yeah, it's an option, this for that, at least they're being honest with you. You can make an informed choice. But if they're advertising and saying no money down, well, say the quiet part out loud then. What's the other half of that equation? What are you asking me to do in exchange for this? Because no one's just out there saying, take money. We don't care how much you can pay back. The other thing with that you want to be careful of is no closing costs. So when you buy a home, there are a set of closing costs that are related to things like appraisals and taxes and a few other things. No closing cost means they're paying for all of them. Or are they? How many are getting roped into the principal balance of the loan you're going to pay? Yeah, you won't have to pay them up front, but where are they getting allocated? Again, that HUD-1 settlement statement I mentioned, that's where all that gets specified. So you got to make sure you know what's happening. No closing costs may simply be ... yet. You pay them later. Or we're again increasing the cost in other ways so that you'll pay us back more money over time. Make sense? And again, I'm not saying that this group would be a predatory lender, but the advertising makes me think it's probably suspicious. And I would have my, again, like when your hair raises in a scary movie, start to do a little bit of that. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
If you have property taxes and the person got a certificate, you pay your taxes, but the certificate is still out there. How does that work?
It's a fantastic question, and I didn't fully cover that, so thank you for asking it. The question was, if a certificate is issued because you don't pay property taxes, but then you go and pay those taxes that weren't paid, what happens? How does that all work? Well, if you do that quickly enough, you pay off the certificate, and it basically cancels it out, like it never existed. And so what happens is when you, let's say you don't pay this year's property taxes, right? So sometime next year, right around this time of year, the property appraiser would try to sell that certificate for the 2021 or 2022 taxes, right? The next year. So let's say in December, you get the money together and you go and pay them. Okay, well, they will go ahead and cancel the certificate. Some other good news is the certificate doesn't have interest, so you don't have to pay more than your taxes were. So if your bill was $1,500 and that's what the certificate was for, once you paid that, it's canceled. The problem is, if you're just now paying that one, what's going to happen come April the next year when your next year's taxes are due? And that's where I've seen a lot of people get into this vicious cycle. They pay off one certificate, and then another one's issued the next year. And they get slowly further and further behind until they're not able to pay off the full certificate. And the property appraiser can't take a half payment. They have to have the full amount to pay off that certificate. And if the certificate's at the end of it, once the 2 years has passed and they call it due, you have to pay all of the existing certificates and any unpaid taxes that haven't been redeemed for a certificate yet. So basically, it's 3 years of taxes at once in many cases. That's why it's dangerous. That's why it's something that you can really fall behind on quickly. So some options to consider in those situations. Remember, property taxes are usually not the most expensive thing in the world. There are some options to address them. I usually don't talk about bankruptcy lightly because bankruptcy is complicated, it's hard. It's really hard to do without an attorney. But there is an option to use what's called a Chapter 13 bankruptcy to pay off some of those taxes over time. But there's a lot of other conditions and giant asks that come with that, so you have to be careful. Usually the best thing, if you're in a situation like that, and this is gonna sound a little weird, is to use unsecured debt, unsecured loans to try to pay that off. An example for an elderly person, and I'm not saying do this, but it's something to keep in mind. Let's say you use a small online loan for $3,000 to pay off those property taxes. And now you can't pay back that lender. And let's say you're 72 and your only money is from Social Security. Well, yeah, you might not pay back that lender, and then they'll sue you for money. And you won't have a legal defense and they'll get a judgment. The thing is, you're on Social Security. Under federal law, they can't garnish your money. It's unsecured, it's not tied to your property. So in some cases, and again, I must stress, be very cautious and seek someone's advice before you do this in your own situation. But there are some ways to use certain types of debt, certain types of loans that are unsecured to property, personal property or real property, to pay off secured debts, the things that can take your home or your car if you don't pay them. Again, it's dangerous because you could end up in debt in other ways, but in some cases, it can be the only option to help save you from losing a secured debt. If that makes sense. The way I like to think about it is certain loans come with a big burden. If you don't pay us, you lose your house. If you don't pay us, you lose your car. Other debts don't come with those. It's just you owe us money. Okay, that's sad, but if in the grand scheme of things, if you have to take one to pay the other, you know which of the two to pick. And that's something to just think about. Now again, be tactical, be careful, because you can make mistakes in that too. But I just wanted to raise that as a potential thing because that does come up in some of these instances. Yes, ma'am.
Can you rephrase, say it again, because I know someone, with their taxes, they say their taxes had been behind. And so they said to them, the tax place, if they don't worry about the one that's behind, but just continue, they could just start paying on the one present.
So the question is, with someone who gets behind in property taxes, let's say a certificate is issued for the first one, right? They go to the property appraiser and they say, don't worry about the certificate yet, focus on this year's taxes. That's the wrong advice. If they're giving that advice, that's not good. The advice is take out the certificate because, again, after 2 years when that certificate was issued, whoever holds it can call for that tax sale. And that doesn't matter if there's other taxes that have been paid. That certificate, that time is the one that matters the most. So let's use a hypothetical. 2 certificates, one from 2020, one from 2021. You only have enough money to pay for one of them. Which do you pay? 2020, every time. Because again, it could be called up for sale soon. 2021, you got another year. And even if you're just keeping afloat by paying off one, a year, and you're always a little behind, but you're keeping afloat, it's better than going under the ship. Make sense? Yes, again, ma'am.
On the certificate, when a person buys a certificate, does that mean he pays your taxes for that year?
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what it is. like I said before, it's a way for tax collectors to get the money they're owed since the homeowner didn't pay it. So what happens is when you buy a certificate, you get the right to collect exactly that money in the event the homeowner pays. And actually you get a little more if you go through a tax sale at the end. You get some extra money at the end from the sale as well. So there is a reason to get some extra, like if you wonder why do people buy these, it's because there is some money to make there. It's a low-end investment, but as you can see, it's a pretty secure one. Either you get paid by the homeowner redeeming the certificate, or you get paid from the sale of their house. Again, I wouldn't do this personally because I think it's sad and it's not something I'd ever want to do because of the work I do, but it's something people, do invest in.
You know, there's a lot of people who definitely because of that.
Yes, ma'am. I've represented a good number of them.
I won't say homeowners, but agencies, people that buy certificates to make sure that you do your own. And it goes on a lot in the Black community.
Right, and it's something when the lady in the back had mentioned before that there are people out there who buy them up and try to use them for nefarious purposes. That is one of them. I mean, the truth of some types of investing is it's not really investing in building something. It's investing in tearing something down. And again, it's been a long piece of Florida law. It's a part of laws in all 50 states, but it's something that there at least is an increasing awareness of it and how it harms communities. And there are some efforts, hopefully, to start to change it, but it's going to be hard because at the end of it, it's all about, cities need tax revenue. They don't get it. They can't pay for schools. They can't pay for fire services. They can't pay for police. And worse, they can't pay for roads. And if anyone's had to drive in really bad places with bad roads, it's tough. Everything falls apart when infrastructure can't be paid for. So it's just worth knowing it's a tough fight. As much as we really want to see it change, it's going to be a hard fight from a legislative side to get that changed. But that's why, again, prevention is important. The more people know this is a risk, the more people can think about it ahead of time. Because like I said, if your choice is between paying a medical bill and paying your property taxes, you pay your property taxes. Your medical bills are going to haunt you in other ways, but not that bad, never that bad. Your credit card debts can't take your house from you, almost ever. It is almost impossible for a credit card debt to cost you your house. So part of another piece of this is learning when you're in a bad situation, there's a way to manage it as best you can. And that's really the fight, is finding the best way forward in a bad situation so that you have enough time to find a way to punch out and get to a happier tomorrow. Again, when you fall behind with something like property taxes, you got 2 years to catch up, and everyone knows how hard that is.
I have a question. I personally inquired about this property because I know that in this community they said that it's going to demolish some building that wasn't used. So I personally inquired about this property. I knew the individual. When I went up to the city hall up there to the tax place, I seen that they had a lien. Had a certificate on the building. Okay, they already had somebody had already purchased the certificate. So the lady there stated to me that even though someone has purchased that certificate at that time, she said that it does not mean that they're gonna get that building because it has to go in auction.
Yes, yeah.
So she said that doesn't necessarily mean that. So what happened was though in the process of that, they I have to say this, and this is true. I spoke to the individual and I said, well, you need to pay up this taxes. I said, because they have the about 2 certificates on there. So anyway, so the individual passed, and they didn't have a sign on that property that it was for sale. So what that individual family did, they sold that land to Gainesville Housing.
Okay. I mean,
But it didn't have a for sale sign on there, so they said that, when I inquired, because I found out about that, I'm one trailblazer. And he said to me that the person came to them and they paid up the taxes.
Yeah, and so one thing that does happen, and it's part of what we call heirs property, right? Property that somebody, had and cultivated over a long time, and sadly, they didn't make a plan for it when they passed away. It then comes to their heirs, right? Their heirs might have to do a lot of things to clarify their title, their legal title to the property. And oftentimes, it can be a complicated mess. It can be something that the heirs fight about. It can be all kinds of different issues that come up. But one thing that happens in communities of color particularly is people try to start leeching from the heirs, try to basically pick them off one by one, paying them a certain amount just to get them to give their share, right? We get 1/2 from this person, we get 1/4 from this person. At the end, we own all the shares, and we acquire for much less than the value of whole. One thing that's arisen to combat this is housing authorities like the Gainesville Housing Authority and other nonprofits trying to help acquire those properties so they can build communities and support for communities instead of private groups coming in to basically transform communities and change them into something they can profit from. And so it's something to keep in mind. That's one of the strategies that's being employed to help revitalize communities is keeping it in local hands, keeping it in the hands of people who are invested in the success of the community, not who are trying to change it for their purposes, to make it what they want it to be, right? To build a 7-story multi-family luxury student apartment complex, instead to build smaller, scattered sites housing that might be provided to people who are low income, or rent, that's subsidized. There's all kinds of different strategies, and it's something that has become a bigger part of preserving communities.
Because I found out that the building I was inquiring on, when they purchased the building, so what they have not physically started building, but they're gonna put
Condominiums? Yeah. Condos, everyone loves a condo.
Condominium, and 3 sections, and then a house in the other area of it. So they already done, it has not, this is the historical, it has not materialized, isn't it? Yes. So this is what they're gonna do, so, I don't know if everybody would not know that, but I've been like really praying, because we really needed that, the property that, I was inquiring about, and I was sorry that they had sold, so, we had talked to Corey at that time, and he said, well, you come up with this amount of money, we can purchase it back.
Yeah, so an interesting thing, we were talking about the certificates. So again, if a certificate stays out for 2 years, the person calls for a sale, it goes to this non-judicial auction sale, right? It's not advertised like a sign and then people just come up and try to buy it, rather it's an auction where it's competitive. As you might imagine, the same people who buy certificates then try to buy it at auction. And so a lot of times they're forcing the issue. And when I mentioned before, part of getting this information out is protecting a community. Well, let's say an institutional equity company from Venezuela wants to park a bunch of money in the United States just for money laundering purposes or something like that. What they might do is try to buy that up. It's not because they want to use your community to build something productive. They just want to shelter money in a collection-proof asset that nobody can touch. About 1/4 of all of Miami's real estate is parked money from overseas. No one's using it, no one's living in it. It's just money parked in real estate. And it's a big problem because, if you're, I'm speaking to an audience who knows this far better than I do, but if you live here, you want this to be a community for you. You want it to be yours. You want the businesses to support you. You want the businesses to support the people who live and work here. You don't want it to be vacant real estate, or worse, real estate that's rented out to whoever who has the money to do it. And so that's part of how these predatory lending practices I mentioned, there is a through line to historical racial steering and redlining. It's a way of trying to get into now valuable properties. And Porter's has historically been one of those places where entities that want to expand the university are trying to find their way in. So again, protecting against some things like property taxes can be a good way of helping preserve a community's identity and keep it within the hands it should stay in. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up here. So I'll be around maybe 10 more minutes for any questions, but I'm going to go ahead and take this down and end the recording. I thank everyone for coming and giving me such good questions. And again, if you ever have other questions, we're doing this as part of a series with the City of Gainesville. We'll be doing a few more events, a few other topics across the rest of the summer and the end of the year. So feel free to keep the word out and keep an eye out for things, and you'll see us again.